I used to think the worst thing about being married to Helena was her morning routine. 27 different skincare products, each applied with the precision of a surgeon and the drama of a Broadway actress. But sitting in my car outside the Marriott downtown, watching my wife of 15 years slip her tongue into another man's mouth, I realized I'd been thinking too small. The man was Donovan Price, her divorce attorney. Yes, you read that right. My wife was making out with the lawyer she'd hired to divorce me, and they were doing it in broad daylight like a couple of teenagers who just discovered hormones. I should have been angry. I should have stormed across that parking lot and made a scene worthy of Jerry Springer. Instead, I sat there in my Honda Civic, the car Helena constantly mocked as embarrassing, and felt something much more dangerous than rage. I felt calm. My name is Pierce Sterling, and I'm what you might call professionally invisible. For the past 8 years, I've worked as a quantitative analyst at Meridian Capital, a mid-tier investment firm in Boston's financial district. To most people, including my wife, that translates to boring office drone who stares at spreadsheets all day. It's a reputation I've never bothered to correct. The truth is more complicated, but then again, truth usually is. I pulled out my phone and took several photos of Helena and Donovan's parking lot performance. The camera captured everything: his hands on her waist, her fingers tangled in his silver hair, the way she pressed against his BMW like she was trying to merge with German engineering itself. Helena had been working late a lot recently. Her boutique, Sterling Designs, supposedly required evening inventory sessions and weekend vendor meetings. For a woman who'd never shown interest in actual work during our entire marriage, this sudden dedication to commerce had been suspicious from the start. But I'm a patient man. In my line of work, you learn to wait for patterns to emerge. You watch the data, note the anomalies, and resist the urge to act on incomplete information. Markets punish the impulsive. So do divorce courts. My phone buzzed with a text from Helena. "Running late tonight. Vendor emergency. Don't wait up. XOXO." I glanced at the timestamp. 3:47 p.m. She was texting me about working late while actively making out with her lawyer in a hotel parking lot. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. Donovan Price had a reputation in Boston legal circles. Expensive, ruthless, and completely without scruples when it came to asset division. Helena had hired him 6 months ago, ostensibly to explore her options, after our marriage hit what she called an irreparable rough patch. The rough patch, according to Helena, was my complete failure as a husband. I didn't make enough money. I wasn't ambitious enough. I embarrassed her at social gatherings with my boring job talk and cheap clothes. Her friends, a collection of social climbing suburbanites who treated gossip like an Olympic sport, had apparently been very supportive of her marital dissatisfaction. "Pierce just doesn't understand what I need," she'd told her friend Mara during a phone conversation I'd overheard last month. "He's content being nobody special. I deserve better than a 44-year-old office worker who drives a Honda." Mara had agreed enthusiastically. Mara always agreed enthusiastically. It was her primary social skill. "You should totally leave him," Mara had said. "Get yourself a real man with real money. Life's too short to settle for mediocre." Mediocre. That word had stuck with me for weeks. Now, watching Helena climb into Donovan's BMW, I wondered if she'd shared her assessment of my mediocrity with her new boyfriend. I wondered if they laughed about it during their vendor meetings. I wondered if Donovan had assured her that taking me to the cleaners would be easier than stealing candy from a particularly stupid baby. The BMW pulled out of the parking lot, Helena's blonde hair visible through the passenger window. They were probably heading upstairs to room 412, the same room number that had appeared on 3 different hotel receipts I'd found in Helena's purse over the past month. I started my embarrassing Honda and drove back to our house in Brookline. It was a beautiful place, worth about $1.2 million, with floor-to-ceiling windows and an open concept design that Helena loved because it was perfect for entertaining. We'd bought it 5 years ago, back when Helena still pretended to find my financial conservatism endearing rather than pathetic. The house was empty, as expected. Helena wouldn't be home until late, and when she arrived, she'd be full of elaborate stories about demanding vendors and inventory crises. She'd probably shower immediately to wash off the hotel soap smell and then complain about how exhausted she was from working so hard. I poured myself a scotch and sat in my home office, a small room Helena had grudgingly allowed me to claim as my own. She called it Pierce's Cave when talking to friends, always with a slight sneer that suggested successful men didn't need caves. My computer hummed to life, and I opened a secure folder labeled Personal Projects. Inside were 6 months' worth of carefully documented evidence: hotel receipts, restaurant bills, suspicious text messages, and a detailed timeline of Helena's work schedule that corresponded perfectly with Donovan's calendar. I'd been building this file since the day Helena announced she was consulting with a divorce attorney. Not because I suspected an affair, that revelation was recent, but because I understood something about my wife that she'd never realized I understood. Helena was fundamentally lazy. She'd never worked a real job before opening her boutique, and even that was more hobby than business. The idea that she'd suddenly developed an obsessive work ethic was laughable. When someone like Helena starts claiming to work 60-hour weeks, they're usually working on something other than inventory. My phone rang. Helena's picture flashed on the screen, a photo from our honeymoon in Tuscany where she looked genuinely happy. That woman felt like a stranger now. "Hey, babe," she said, slightly breathless. "This vendor situation is absolutely insane. I'm going to be stuck here until at least 9. "That's terrible," I said. "Which vendor is causing problems?" A pause. Helena had never been good at thinking on her feet. The scarf vendor. From Italy. Marco something. He's being completely unreasonable about delivery schedules." "Marco from Italy is in Boston tonight." No, conference call. International conference call. The time difference is making everything complicated." "Of course. Well, don't work too hard." "I won't. Love you." She hung up before I could respond, which was probably for the best. I wasn't sure I could have managed "love you too" without laughing. I opened my laptop and began typing. Not an angry email or a confrontational text, but a detailed memo to myself about the day's discoveries. In my business, documentation is everything. Emotions are irrelevant. Data is truth, and the data was telling a very clear story about my wife, her lawyer, and their mutual underestimation of the boring office worker they were planning to destroy. Nina Rodriguez had been tending bar at Murphy's Pub for 12 years, and in that time, she'd developed an almost supernatural ability to read people. So when I walked into her establishment at 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, ordered a double scotch, and sat in the corner booth with my laptop, she knew something was up. "You look like a man with problems," she said, sliding the drink across my table. "I look like a man with solutions," I corrected. Nina was one of the few people who knew what I actually did for a living. We'd met at a charity poker game 3 years ago, where she'd systematically cleaned out a table full of finance bros who'd underestimated the bartender in jeans and sneakers. She understood numbers, patterns, and the art of letting people underestimate you. "Helena troubles?" she asked. "Helena solutions." I opened my laptop and showed her the photos from the hotel parking lot. Nina whistled low. "Donovan Price? Damn, Pierce. Your wife doesn't mess around." "Apparently not." "What's your play?" That was what I liked about Nina. No wasted sympathy, no moral outrage, just straight to strategy. She understood that sometimes life dealt you a bad hand, and the only reasonable response was to play it better than anyone expected. "I'm going to let them think they're winning," I said, right up until they're not. Over the next hour, I explained my situation to Nina. Helena's affair, Donovan's reputation, and the divorce proceedings that were undoubtedly coming. Nina listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. "So, they think you're broke," she said finally. "They think I'm pathetic. There's a difference." "Is there?" I pulled up my employment records on the laptop. Nina's eyes widened as she read. "Holy shit, Pierce. You make how much?" $680,000 a year, as of my promotion last month, plus bonuses." "And Helena doesn't know?" "Helena thinks I'm a mid-level analyst making maybe $60,000. She's never asked for specifics, and I've never volunteered them." This wasn't entirely Helena's fault. When we'd met 15 years ago, I really was making $60,000 as a junior analyst. I'd been careful about lifestyle inflation, maintaining the same modest spending habits even as my income grew exponentially. The Honda, the off-the-rack clothes, the general appearance of financial mediocrity, it had all been intentional. I'd learned early in my career that advertising your success made you a target. Colleagues became resentful, friends became users, family members developed sudden financial emergencies. It was easier to fly under the radar, to let people assume you were doing okay, but nothing special. Helena had been happy with this arrangement initially. She'd married me for stability, not wealth, and my steady, if unspectacular income had seemed sufficient for her needs. But as her social circle evolved and her ambitions grew, my apparent lack of financial progress had become a source of embarrassment. "She's been telling people I'm a failure," I explained to Nina. "Her friends think she married beneath herself." "Let me guess, they've been encouraging the divorce." "Enthusiastically." Nina shook her head. "So, when this goes to court?" "Donovan will argue that I'm a low earner who can't afford significant alimony. Helena will testify about my pathetic salary and complete lack of ambition. They'll present themselves as the successful, dynamic couple who deserve to start fresh without extra weight of my mediocrity. And then? And then the judge will ask about my actual income. Nina grinned. That's going to be one hell of a surprise. It gets better. Helena and I signed a prenuptial agreement. Smart. With an infidelity clause. Nina's grin widened. You sneaky bastard. The prenup had been Helena's idea, actually. Her father had insisted on it, worried that his daughter was marrying someone who might be after her family's money. The irony was that Helena's family had more debt than assets, but appearances mattered more than reality in their social circle. The infidelity clause had been my addition, presented as a way to protect both of us from future temptation. Helena had signed it without reading carefully, confident that she'd never cheat, and equally confident that no other woman would want her boring husband. So if you can prove the affair, Helena gets nothing, no alimony, no asset division beyond what she brought into the marriage, which was approximately zero. What about Donovan? What about him? I mean, what's your play there? I opened another folder on my laptop. Donovan has been very sloppy about documenting his billable hours. According to his invoices, he's been billing Helena for 60 hours a week of legal work for the past 3 months. That seems like a lot for a simple divorce. It's impossible for a simple divorce, but it makes perfect sense if you're billing for services that aren't strictly legal. Nina understood immediately. He's been charging her for dates. Hotel rooms, dinners, weekend trips to the Cape, all billed as client consultations and case preparation. The Massachusetts Bar Association takes a very dim view of attorneys who bill clients for personal entertainment. How do you know all this? Helena's been paying his bills from our joint account. Every invoice, every payment, automatically copied to my email for tax purposes. She set up the arrangement herself, back when she thought she was hiring him for legitimate legal advice. The beauty of Helena's carelessness was that she'd created a perfect paper trail of her own affair. Every romantic dinner had been billed as a consultation. Every hotel room had been labeled case preparation. Donovan had been essentially billing me for the privilege of sleeping with my wife. This is diabolical, Nina said admiringly. This is thorough. When do you make your move? When they make theirs. Helena's going to file for divorce soon, probably within the next month. Donovan's been building what he thinks is an airtight case for maximum alimony based on my supposed inability to support myself. And you're going to let him? I'm going to encourage him. I closed the laptop and finished my scotch. The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. I would continue playing the role of the pathetic, low-earning husband right up until the moment it mattered most. In court, under oath, Helena and Donovan would confidently assert my worthlessness. They'd paint a picture of a failed marriage to a failed man who couldn't provide for his wife's basic needs. And then I'd produce my tax returns. You know what I like about this plan? Nina said. What? It's not just about the money. It's about the humiliation. They're going to look like idiots in front of a judge. They're going to look like exactly what they are, a cheating wife and her corrupt lawyer who thought they could outsmart someone they never bothered to understand. Nina raised her glass. To underestimation. To consequences. We drank, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. Not for revenge, exactly, but for justice. For the moment when careful planning would meet careless arrogance, and the universe would restore some semblance of balance. Helena thought she was playing chess while I played checkers. She was about to discover that I'd been playing a completely different game. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning in March, delivered by a courier who seemed apologetic about ruining my day. Helena had already left for her vendor meeting. I'd stopped putting those in quotes mentally, since we both knew what they really were, so I had the house to myself when I opened the envelope. Donovan had done thorough work, I had to admit. The petition painted a picture of an irretrievably broken marriage between a dynamic, successful businesswoman and her underachieving husband who'd failed to grow personally or professionally during their 15 years together. Helena was seeking permanent alimony, half of all marital assets, and exclusive use of the family home. The financial affidavit was particularly creative. According to Helena's sworn statement, I earned approximately $65,000 per year as a low-level financial analyst and had no prospects for advancement due to lack of ambition and professional skills. She estimated my total assets at roughly $30,000, not counting my aging vehicle and modest retirement account. I had to admire the confidence it took to lie so comprehensively under oath. Helena had clearly never wondered why a man making $65,000 could afford a $1.2 million house, or how we'd managed to pay off our mortgage in 7 years, or where the money had come from for her boutique's startup costs. She'd simply accepted that these things happened and never questioned the mechanism. My phone rang. Helena's photo smiled at me from the screen. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice carefully modulated to sound sad but determined. "I hope you got my letter." "I got something," I said, though I'm not sure letter is the right word for legal documents. Pierce, I want you to know this isn't easy for me, but we both know our marriage has been over for a long time. Have we both known that? Don't make this harder than it has to be. I've tried to be fair in my requests." Fair. She wanted permanent alimony from a man she believed made $65,000 a year. She wanted half of assets she thought totaled $30,000. The math alone should have been embarrassing. "I assume you'll want to hire your own attorney," she continued. "I suppose I'll have to." "Donovan recommended someone who might work within your budget constraints. I can have his office send you the contact information." The patronizing tone was perfect. Helena was offering to help her soon-to-be ex-husband find a bargain basement lawyer to handle his side of their divorce. It was the kind of gesture that looked generous on the surface while being deeply insulting underneath. "That's very thoughtful," I said. "I want us to be civilized about this, for both our sakes." After she hung up, I sat in my office and stared at the divorce papers for a long time. 15 years of marriage, reduced to a legal document that portrayed me as a pathetic failure who'd been lucky to have a woman like Helena for as long as I had. The truly infuriating part was that some of it was accurate. I had been complacent in our marriage. I had taken Helena for granted, assuming that our relationship was stable enough to survive my emotional neglect. I had focused on building wealth while ignoring the fact that my wife felt unappreciated and unfulfilled, but none of that justified what she was doing now. The affair, the lies, the systematic humiliation, those were choices Helena had made independently, and the way she and Donovan were planning to destroy me financially was pure greed, not emotional justice. I called the attorney Helena had recommended, a tired-sounding man named Robert Chen, who specialized in affordable family law solutions. His consultation fee was $150, payable in advance, and he could see me the following Tuesday if I could take time off work. "What kind of assets are we talking about?" Chen asked during our phone call. "Nothing major. The house has some equity, retirement accounts, savings." "Ballpark total?" "Maybe $200,000, I lied smoothly. "And your income?" $65,000. Chen sighed. "Mr. Sterling, I'm going to be honest with you. If your wife has hired Donovan Price, you're in for a difficult time. His hourly rate is probably more than you make in a week. So what do you recommend?" "Settlement, fast and generous. And Donovan will drag this out until you're bankrupt from legal fees alone." This was exactly what Helena and Donovan were counting on. They expected me to roll over immediately, accepting whatever terms they offered rather than fighting a battle I couldn't afford. It was a reasonable assumption based on the information they had. I scheduled the appointment with Chen and spent the weekend playing my role perfectly. When Helena came home Sunday evening, after another vendor emergency that had kept her out until 2 a.m., I was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of financial documents looking overwhelmed. "How are you holding up?" she asked, her voice full of artificial concern. "It's a lot to process," I said. "I talked to a lawyer. He says you hired someone really expensive. Donovan has a good reputation. He says I should probably just settle quickly before the legal fees get out of hand." Helena tried to hide her satisfaction, but I caught the slight smile that crossed her face. "That might be wise, Pierce. Dragging this out won't help either of us. I just want to be fair. I know you do. That's one of the things I've always liked about you." The condescension was breathtaking. Helena was patting me on the head for being reasonable about my own destruction. Over the next 2 weeks, I played the part of the defeated husband perfectly. I met with Robert Chen, who confirmed that my case was hopeless. I gathered financial documents that supported Helena's narrative about our modest assets. I even test drove a few used cars, making sure Helena saw me researching vehicles that would fit my post-divorce budget. Meanwhile, I was conducting my own investigation into Donovan's practice. Nina had a friend who worked as a paralegal at a competing firm, and through her, I learned some interesting details about Donovan's recent cases. He had a pattern of becoming personally involved with female clients, going through expensive divorces. Not all of them, just the ones with significant assets at stake. He would bill excessive hours for complex negotiations, drag out proceedings to maximize his fees, and occasionally end up in relationships with his clients after their divorces were finalized. It was a lucrative system, and apparently legal, as long as he was careful about timing and documentation. But billing clients for personal entertainment crossed a clear ethical line, and I had months of evidence proving that's exactly what he'd been doing. The Massachusetts Bar Association's disciplinary board met monthly to review complaints against attorneys. I had until the 15th of April to file my grievance if I wanted it heard at their May meeting. The timing would be perfect, right around when Helena's divorce case was scheduled for its first hearing. But first, I needed to let them hang themselves with their own rope. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Helena's voice was excited, almost giddy. "Pierce, I have great news. Donovan thinks we can wrap this up really quickly if you're willing to be reasonable." "What does reasonable mean?" "Well, you'd keep your retirement accounts and maybe $20,000 in cash. I'd take the house and handle all the debts. Clean and simple." $20,000. Out of assets worth approximately $3.2 million, Helena was offering me $20,000 and whatever was in my 401k. It was insulting enough to be almost funny. "That seems generous," I said. "I think so too. And Pierce? Donovan says if we can agree on terms by Friday, we might not even need a full hearing. Just a quick court appearance to make it official." "This Friday?" "I know it's fast, but why drag things out? We both know how this ends?" "Yes," I thought. "We certainly do." "Let me think about it," I said. "Of course. But don't think too long, okay? Donovan's schedule gets really busy if we have to push this into May." After she hung up, I sat in my office and smiled for the first time in weeks. They were rushing toward the finish line, confident that they'd already won. Helena would get everything she wanted, Donovan would collect his fees and keep his new girlfriend, and Pierce Sterling would slink away with his tail between his legs. It was going to be a beautiful surprise when they discovered how wrong they were. The Suffolk County Family Court building looked like it had been designed to crush hope. Gray concrete, narrow windows, and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look either faded or fading. I stood outside on Friday morning, wearing my best suit, which Helena had always criticized as off-the-rack obvious, and watched my wife and her lawyer approach from the parking garage. Helena had dressed for victory. A navy blue power suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, paired with the pearl necklace her mother had given her for our wedding. She looked like a woman who was about to win something important. Donovan looked exactly like Central Casting would order for expensive divorce lawyer. Silver hair, perfect teeth, and a confidence that radiated from his $3,000 suit like cologne. He carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my Honda. They were deep in conversation, heads close together, and I could see Helena laughing at something Donovan had said. They looked like a couple, which I supposed they were. "Mr. Sterling?" I turned to find a young woman in a cheap suit holding a stack of files. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, Mr. Chen's associate. He had a family emergency this morning, so I'll be handling your case." "Perfect." My wife had hired Boston's most expensive divorce attorney, and I was being represented by someone who looked like she'd passed the bar exam last week. "Is that going to be a problem?" I asked. "Not at all. This should be very straightforward. You're accepting the settlement offer, correct?" "That's the plan." We walked into the courthouse together, and I marveled at how perfectly everything was falling into place. Helena and Donovan were so confident in their victory that they'd rushed to court with minimal preparation, assuming that my quick capitulation meant there were no surprises coming. They were half right. I was going to capitulate, just not the way they expected. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, with maybe 30 seats for observers and a raised bench where Judge Morrison presided. She was a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense expression that suggested she'd seen every possible variety of human stupidity. Helena and Donovan took their seats at the plaintiff's table, while Jennifer and I sat across from them at the defendant's table. Helena glanced over at me once, her expression a mixture of pity and satisfaction. She was about to be free of her disappointing husband, and she could barely contain her relief. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Morrison," the bailiff announced. Judge Morrison reviewed the case file for several minutes before speaking. "This is a petition for divorce between Helena Sterling and Pierce Sterling, married 15 years, no children. Mrs. Sterling is seeking dissolution based on irreconcilable differences with a proposed settlement agreement. Is that correct, Mr. Price?" Donovan stood smoothly. "Yes, Your Honor. My client and Mr. Sterling have reached an amicable agreement on all major issues." "Mr. Sterling, you're represented by—" Jennifer stood awkwardly. "Jennifer Walsh, Your Honor, from the Chen Law Office." "And you've advised your client on this settlement?" "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Morrison looked at me directly. "Mr. Sterling, do you understand the terms of this agreement?" I stood. "I believe so, Your Honor." "Your wife receives the marital home, valued at approximately $1.2 million. You receive $20,000 in cash and your retirement accounts. Is that acceptable to you?" "It seems fair, Your Honor." I could see Helena relaxing in her chair. This was going exactly as she'd planned. Judge Morrison frowned at the paperwork. "Mrs. Sterling, you're seeking permanent alimony in the amount of $2,000 per month. That seems high given the proposed asset division." Donovan stood again. Your Honor, my client sacrificed her own career development to support her husband's professional growth. She's entitled to maintain a reasonable standard of living. And what is Mr. Sterling's current income? Approximately $65,000 per year, Your Honor. He works as a financial analyst. Judge Morrison looked at me. Mr. Sterling, is that accurate? This was the moment I'd been planning for months. The moment when careful documentation would meet careless assumptions. The moment when Helena would discover exactly who she'd been married to for 15 years. Not exactly, Your Honor. Helena turned to stare at me, confusion replacing confidence on her face. Could you clarify your current income, Mr. Sterling? I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope. Your Honor, I have my certified tax returns and employment verification letter from Meridian Capital. Jennifer looked confused. Mr. Sterling, we discussed this. Your income is $680,000 per year, Your Honor, as of my promotion to senior partner last month. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Helena's mouth fell open. Donovan's perfect composure cracked like ice on a warm day. I'm sorry, Judge Morrison said. Could you repeat that number? $680,000 annually, Your Honor, plus performance bonuses that typically add another $100,000 to $200,000. Helena found her voice. Wait, how much? Judge Morrison ignored her. Mr. Sterling, why wasn't this information included in your financial disclosure? Your Honor, my wife filed her petition based on her understanding of our finances. I assumed her attorney had done proper due diligence. Donovan was frantically shuffling through papers, looking for documents that didn't exist. Helena was staring at me like I'd just announced I was actually an alien. Your Honor, Donovan stammered, this is highly irregular. We'll need time to review. Mr. Price, did you conduct any investigation into Mr. Sterling's actual income before filing this petition? We relied on information provided by my client, information that was completely wrong. Judge Morrison's voice was getting colder. Mrs. Sterling, did you know your husband's actual salary? Helena was still staring at me. We never talked about... You never asked, I said quietly. But you drive a Honda. Helena's voice was rising toward hysteria. You buy your clothes at Men's Warehouse. You said we couldn't afford a vacation to Europe. I said I preferred to save money. I never said we couldn't afford it. Judge Morrison was reading through my tax returns with growing interest. Mr. Sterling, these documents show significant investment income as well. What's your total net worth? Approximately $3.2 million, Your Honor. Helena made a sound like she was choking. Donovan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. And Mrs. Sterling, Judge Morrison continued, you were seeking permanent alimony from a man you believed made $65,000 per year? You thought you could take half of $30,000 in assets and $2,000 monthly from a man making $65,000? Did you do any math on that arrangement? Helena's face was turning red. I trusted my attorney. Mr. Price, did you verify any of these financial claims before filing? Donovan was sweating now. Your Honor, we relied on good faith representations from a client who is clearly uninformed about her own household finances. Judge Morrison set down the papers. This is either gross incompetence or deliberate fraud. I'm inclined to believe incompetence, since fraud would require criminal referral. Helena finally exploded. This is ridiculous. Pierce is nobody. He's a boring office worker who never does anything. He's useless. Mrs. Sterling, Judge Morrison said sharply, you will control yourself in my courtroom. But Helena was beyond control. 15 years of pent-up frustration and disappointment came pouring out. He has no ambition, no drive. He's perfectly happy being mediocre. I've wasted my whole life married to someone who'll never be anything special. Donovan was trying to quiet her, but Helena was on a roll. He embarrasses me. His job is boring, his clothes are cheap, his car is a joke. My friends feel sorry for me because I married such a loser. Your Honor, I said calmly, I'd like to present additional evidence. I pulled out a second envelope and handed copies to the bailiff. These are hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and other documentation showing that Mrs. Sterling has been having an affair with her attorney for the past 6 months. Helena went silent. Donovan looked like he might vomit. Mr. Price, Judge Morrison said, her voice dangerously quiet. Are you having a relationship with your client? Your Honor, it's a yes or no question, Counselor. The relationship began after the legal representation. Mr. Price, these hotel receipts are dated 3 months ago. When did you begin representing Mrs. Sterling? 6 months ago. Judge Morrison stood up. Everyone else in the courtroom followed suit automatically. Mr. Price, you will remain after this hearing to discuss your conduct with court security. Mrs. Sterling, your petition is denied. Mr. Sterling, given the evidence of adultery and your prenuptial agreement, you are entitled to dissolution with no asset division and no alimony obligations. Helena found her voice again. Wait, what does that mean? It means you get nothing, Mrs. Sterling. Nothing except whatever personal property you brought into the marriage 15 years ago. But I need money. I can't survive on nothing. You should have thought of that before committing adultery with your attorney. Helena turned to me, desperation replacing anger. Pierce, you can't do this. I'm your wife. We can work this out. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who'd spent years belittling me, mocking my job, embarrassing me in front of her friends, and planning to destroy me financially with her lover. Helena, I said quietly, you're absolutely right about one thing. I am perfectly happy being mediocre. The difference is, I was mediocre at the right things. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. This hearing is concluded. Mr. Price, please approach the bench. As I walked out of the courtroom, I could hear Helena crying and Donovan trying to explain something to the judge. Jennifer Walsh looked stunned. Mr. Sterling, she said as we reached the hallway, why didn't you tell us about your real income? Because then it wouldn't have been a surprise. Outside the courthouse, I stood in the gray Boston morning and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete satisfaction. Not happiness, exactly, but the deep contentment that comes from a job well done. My phone buzzed with a text from Nina. How did it go? I typed back, checkmate. Helena emerged from the courthouse 20 minutes later, her makeup ruined and her power suit wrinkled. She looked around the parking lot like she was lost, then spotted me leaning against my Honda. Pierce, she said, walking over slowly, we need to talk. No, we don't. I made a mistake, a huge mistake, but 15 years has to count for something. It does count for something. It counts for exactly what the judge said it counts for. I'll end it with Donovan. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even satisfaction anymore. Just emptiness, where 15 years of marriage used to be. Helena, do you know what I do for a living? You're a financial analyst. I'm a quantitative analyst specializing in high-frequency trading algorithms. I design computer programs that make split-second investment decisions based on market patterns. Last year, my algorithms generated $47 million in profit for Meridian Capital. She stared at me blankly. Do you know what my favorite part of the job is? It's the moment when all the data comes together and you can see exactly what's going to happen next, when chaos becomes predictable. Pierce, I don't understand. You never understood. That was the problem. I got in my Honda and drove away, leaving Helena standing in the courthouse parking lot with nothing but her expensive clothes and her ruined plans. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to going home.